The link, absolute proof that the Rtvik system is the system that His Divine Grace wanted. The July 9th directive includes a very clear link connecting his naming of Rtvik representatives here in the letter to when he said he would soon do so at a recent meeting Srila Prabhupada had with the GBC that took place in Vrindavan. This link provides absolute proof that the Rtvik system is the system that Srila Prabhupada wanted us to follow. The link referred to is as follows. I'm quoting from the July 9th letter. Recently, when all of the GBC members were with His Divine Grace in Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada indicated that soon he would appoint some of his senior disciples to act as Rtvik representatives of the Acharya for the purpose of performing initiations, both first and second initiation. His Divine Grace has so far given a list of 11 disciples who will act in that capacity. End of quote. This link is made at the opening of the letter. Typically what appears in the opening sentences of an important document sets the intent and purpose of the message that is to follow. Srila Prabhupada engaged with Tamal in numerous meetings to ensure that what this letter stated was what Srila Prabhupada wanted it to say. The placement of this link in the opening statement of the document is intentional and carries substantial weight. This sets the author's intent and purpose of the document. Everyone accepts that what is referred to here is the May 28th meeting. That was the only recent time that the GBC were with Srila Prabhupada in Vrindavan, and it was the only time when Srila Prabhupada said he would soon recommend some men to act as Ritviks. Before I give my analysis to this link, let's first look at how the GBC saw this link and this letter, especially how they saw it back in July of 1977 and onward for decades thereafter. The GBC's conclusion was that the Rtvik system detailed and authorized in this letter was only meant to be temporary and only while Srila Prabhupada remained with us in his earthly Vapu form, and was not to apply for after he departed. The GBC also saw the list of 11 men given in this letter to, and most importantly, to be a list of actual gurus, a list of 11 men who will initiate their own disciples as soon as Srila Prabhupada leaves this world. What is the basis of these conclusions reached by the GBC? Again, it goes back to, yes, that flawed and totally corrupt and totally wrong official GBC report of the May 28th meeting, which wrongly stated that when Srila Prabhupada was asked how initiations would be conducted after he is no longer present with us, the report stated that Srila Prabhupada's response was that he would soon select some men who will initiate their own disciples, meaning that they would become regular and actual Diksha Gurus on Srila Prabhupada's disappearance. That is what the flawed GBC report stated, and similar enough. However, it was not what His Divine Grace said. I'll get to that shortly, but for now I want to show how and why the GBC reached the conclusions they did back in July of 1977 and onward. Again, the basis of their conclusions was the flawed GBC report of the May 28th meeting. What we will see in the coming timelines is that Tamal Krishna's original understanding was that the Rtvik system Srila Prabhupada authorized here in this letter was for after Srila Prabhupada departed. But soon his stand on this changed. How? Why? Because based on the flawed May 28th report, the rest of the GBC were only anticipating that Srila Prabhupada will soon be selecting men who will become regular gurus, who will initiate their own disciples. That's what the report stated. And that is what the whole GBC was anticipating. There was no mention in the GBC report, the May 28th report, about Ritviks, and no mention of Srila Prabhupada having to give his order before anyone could become an actual regular guru. All the report stated was that Srila Prabhupada would soon select men, and they would initiate their own disciples on Srila Prabhupada's disappearance. And so that is all that the rest of the GBC were looking for and anticipating. They were waiting to see who Srila Prabhupada would select, because those men he will select, the GBC thought that those men would become the next new acharyas in our disciplic line. So the only thing the GBC was looking for was a list of names, listing who Srila Prabhupada will have selected. So 5.5 weeks later, here comes the July 9th letter. And in this letter, it gives a link back to the May 28th meeting. And the letter gives a list of 11 men selected by Srila Prabhupada. That was what the GBC thought they were waiting for. This was it. This was a list of those who Srila Prabhupada has now selected. This letter provided that list. And in the letter, it was given a clear link, linking this back to the May 28th meeting. Then this was it. This was the list of men who the GBC was waiting for to see who Srila Prabhupada would have selected. Therefore, the GBC concluded that these 11 men, the men that Srila Prabhupada had selected, who, according to the May 28th report on Srila Prabhupada's disappearance, these men, they will initiate their own disciples. They will become regular gurus, or as the GBC later referred to them as the 11 new acharyas. However, the link wasn't as straightforward as the GBC was thinking. They had to do a little twisting and bending in order to make it fit their expectations. You see, the link in the July 9th letter links back to the meeting to when Srila Prabhupada said he would soon select Ritviks? Oops, Ritviks. That isn't what the GBC's May 28th report stated. It said the men he would soon select will initiate their own disciples. So what is this about him selecting Ritviks? And then there was the other problem, and that is that this letter only stated that these 11 men were to be Ritviks. And it clearly states that they will perform the initiation ceremonies on behalf of Srila Prabhupada, where those who are initiated will become Srila Prabhupada's disciples. Well, that's another big giant oops. This is clearly not what the GBC report stated. It said that Srila Prabhupada will soon select men who will initiate their own disciples on his disappearance. What is all this nonsense about Rtvik? But those inconsistencies seem to be nullified as soon as someone who must have been, in the meeting recalled that, yes, Srila Prabhupada did mention in that meeting, he did mention Ritviks in the May 28th meeting, and he did say that they would only initiate on his behalf while he was present, and that on his disappearance, no one mentioned anything about on his order. On his disappearance, they would then become actual gurus and initiate their own disciples. Well, that seemed to make sense. And it seemed to resolve those oops problems. And so the GBC reached their conclusion based on the flawed May 28th report that the Rtvik system authorized in this letter was only to apply while Srila Prabhupada was still present with us, and that on his disappearance, these 11 selected men would have become the 11 new acharyas. Even though this letter mentions absolutely nothing about these men becoming actual gurus, and the letter mentions nothing at all that this system was only to apply while Srila Prabhupada was present, yet what I've explained, this is how and why the GBC came to these conclusions. It was that May 28th flawed and wrong May 28th report. So even though Tamal's original understanding was that this letter and the Rtvik system authorized by this letter was for after Srila Prabhupada departed, because that's what Srila Prabhupada was telling him as he was dictating this letter to him, still the other GBC convinced him after some days, in the coming days, that he was mistaken about this. He had to be, because they reminded him what the GBC at least thought Srila Prabhupada had said on May 28th, according to the flawed GBC report, that he would give a list of men and they would become, they would initiate their own disciples on Srila Prabhupada's disappearance. Thus, they convinced Tamal that he was wrong about this letter, that in reality, that it really wasn't for after Srila Prabhupada was no longer present with us, but rather this letter was only for while he was present with us. And it can't be ignored that Tamal was one of the 11 named men on this list, and he himself admitted that he had strong desire to become guru. I'll give a quote from Tamal Krishna, what he spoke on December of 1980 at the Topanga Kenya meeting. He said, and I'm quoting, "They, the GBC, immediately decided that these 11 people are the selected gurus." I'll just interrupt the quote. I'll just insert here that because of the GBC report and the selected gurus, where did they get the idea that there's going to be any selected gurus? That flawed GBC report said that Prabhupada will soon select men and they'll initiate their own disciples. So the GBC, and I'll again go back to Tamal's quote, he said, they, the GBC, immediately decided that these 11 people are the selected gurus. I can definitely say for myself, for which I humbly beg forgiveness from everybody, that there was definitely some degree of trying to control. And then he said, I'm still quoting from Tamal, "This is the conditioned nature, and it came out in the highest position of all. Guru, oh wonderful, now I am Guru, and there are only 11 of us." End of quote by Tamal Krishna. It is easy to see why Tamal would be so willing to accept that he was wrong about this letter and the Rtvik system detailed here as being for after Srila Prabhupada departed, because by accepting what the GBC were arguing that no, this had to be for these were the selection of the actual gurus, because by accepting their argument and accepting that he was wrong about this letter, then he would become a guru. As soon as Srila Prabhupada leaves, he'll become guru. And he was, and as he told us in that Topanga Kenya meeting in December of 1980, that his thinking at the time was, now I am a guru, and there is only 11 of us.
And as soon as he learned the Guru Maharaj is there, now I am so advanced that I can kill my guru and he'll become. Now I am so advanced that I can kill my guru and he'll become.
All right, so far I have detailed how the GBC saw this letter and the link in this letter that links it back to the May 28th meeting, and how they reached the conclusions they reached back in 1977. Now I will analyze this link based not on the flawed and misleading GBC May 28th report, as the GBC did, but we will analyze it based on what Srila Prabhupada actually said, what his actual response was on May 28th. I will analyze what this link is actually linking here in this letter and what it is linking it to in the May 28th meeting. As we have already pointed out, on May 28th, Srila Prabhupada said he would soon be selecting some men. But unlike the flawed GBC report that wrongly stated he would soon be selecting men who would initiate their own disciples, rather, what Srila Prabhupada had actually said was that he would soon select men who would act as officiating acharyas, which he agreed were Ritviks, officiating Ritviks. And in the opening statement of this letter, it directly links this letter, not only to just the May 28th meeting, but it specifically states that it is linked to when Srila Prabhupada said he would soon appoint senior devotees to act as Ritviks. I quote from the July 9th letter. Quote, recently, when all of the GBC members were with His Divine Grace in Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada indicated that soon he would appoint some of his senior disciples to act as Ritvik. representatives of the Acharya for the purpose of performing initiations. End of quote. Despite the fact that the flawed GBC report didn't mention anything at all about Srila Prabhupada saying he would soon select men who were to act as officiating Ritviks, since this meeting was recorded, we have the actual recordings and transcripts, and we can both read and hear for ourselves what Srila Prabhupada actually said. We can hear for ourselves who he said he would soon select. He stated he would soon recommend some of the GBC to act as officiating acharyas, which he agreed were Ritviks. Well, let's hear it.
After this is settled, I should recommend someone to act as officiating acharya. Is that for Rtvik?
So this is what Srila Prabhupada actually said. This was his actual response. As compared to the GBC report of that May 28th meeting, which, by the way, was the only thing that the GBC members had to go by. They didn't have the actual recording. That had been sent off to Krishna Kani in Los Angeles. And since it wasn't a lecture or a philosophical discussion, these type of meetings like this, they just went into archive and set on a shelf. So there were no copies of the tape. There were no transcripts. So the only thing the GBC had to go by was the flawed GBC report. And it said that Prabhupada said he would soon select devotees who would initiate their own disciples. They would become regular gurus on Prabhupada's disappearance. It didn't mention anything about Rtvik, didn't mention anything about on his orders. But here we have the actual recording. We can hear it. Srila Prabhupada is saying he will soon select officiating acharyas, which he agreed were Ritviks. And the link given in this letter very clearly links this letter to that statement, where Srila Prabhupada said he would soon select Ritviks. Unlike where the GBC had to bend and twist this, because the letter stated it was linking to when he said he would select Ritviks. The GBC had to twist it so that it fit the flawed report that said he would soon select men who would initiate their own disciples. But here we are just analyzing this based on what both Srila Prabhupada actually said on May 28th and what he stated in writing and the written and signed document, the July 9th letter. Our conclusions are based on what he actually said, straight up, no bending, no twisting. Okay, so this statement links the letter to when he said he would soon select Ritviks. Now, what exactly is being linked here between the July 9th letter and that May 28th meeting? The GBC only looked at it as the list of 11 men and said that this was linked to the flawed report that stated these men would become initiating gurus, so initiate their own disciples. But, and while we agree that the 11 men are definitely being linked here in this July 9th letter, they aren't the only thing being linked. And obviously they aren't being linked to what the flawed report stated, but they are being linked to what Srila Prabhupada actually said. So what else is being linked here in this letter to the May 28th meeting? The Rtvik system itself. The Rtvik system that is being authorized herein with this July 9th letter, that is also linked to the May 28th meeting. And how is it linked? This is important to understand. Yes, on May 28th, Srila Prabhupada said he would soon select or recommend some of the GBC to act as officiating Ritviks. But why did he make that statement? That was part of his response to the first question on this topic the GBC had asked him on May 28th. The GBC had asked Srila Prabhupada, how are initiations to be conducted in the future when you are no longer present with us? It is to that question that part of Srila Prabhupada's response was that he would soon select some men to act as Ritviks. But that was only part of his response to that question. And just selecting men to act as Ritviks does not directly address the question that was being asked. Just naming Ritviks doesn't explain how those Ritvik initiations are to be conducted. It was the other part of Srila Prabhupada's response to their question which addressed this. This being, how are those initiations to be conducted? This was the real essence of their question. And what exactly was the other part of Srila Prabhupada's response, which actually addresses the real essence of their question? That is what I have called the 5 key words. After this is settled up.
After this is settled up.
After this is settled up, then he will select Ritviks. This, the GBC's main question on this topic on May 28th, this Srila Prabhupada did not give any settled up or final answer to on that day, May 28th. Srila Prabhupada deferred it to a later date. He can't answer this question on that day, May 28th, until after he settles up how those initiations, how the Ritvik initiations are to be conducted when he is no longer present with us. Therefore, the link given here in this letter not only links the names of the 11 men to when he said he would soon select Ritviks, but it also links the description given in this letter as to how those Ritvik initiations are to be conducted. It links that description to the question that was asked on May 28th. And that was their question. How are these initiations to be conducted? And here, in this July 9th letter, after Srila Prabhupada gives the names of the 11 Ritviks, he then describes how the Ritvik initiations are to be conducted. I mean, it just flows. We're not twisting anything here. We're just reading what Prabhupada said, what he actually said on May 28th. The flawed GBC report said he said something totally different, and that's what threw off the whole GBC in 1977 and for decades afterwards. But what we have the ability to do is go back and see the actual words and what was actually said, and that's what we're basing on. We're not twisting anything. The reason the GBC have been having to twist and bend is because that GBC report was flawed, and so they got off on the wrong path. And everything they've been trying to take evidence, well, we got to twist it a little bit and bend it to make sure it fits the path that we are on, because we were on this path. But they weren't supposed to be on that path. And that's why they always have to twist and bend things to make it fit. Whereas what I'm doing is I'm just saying, no, we can go back to the original. This is what Prabhupada said. And so we don't have to twist and bend anything. What we're doing is we're taking what he actually said and what was stated in the letter and the links and showing how they link, and everything fits perfectly. Srila Prabhupada didn't say he was soon going to select men who would initiate their own disciples. That's what the report said, but that was a flawed report. What he actually said, he would soon select men who will be Ritviks. And then, well, and so then, and what was the question that was asked? Why did he just say, I'm going to select Ritviks? Because they asked him how initiations to be conducted when you're no longer with us. And Prabhupada said, well, this is not settled yet, but after this is settled, then I will select some of you to act as Ritviks. Then the July 9th letter, that links not just the 11 men, but it links, and it states specifically that it links to when Srila Prabhupada had said he would soon select Ritviks on May 28th. And why did he say that? Why did he just come out and say, I'm going to soon select some Ritviks? It was an answer to his question, to the question, the GBC asked. And it got a little off script, but maybe. Thus, this letter is his final and settled up answer to this question that was asked of him on May 28th. This opening statement of the July 9th letter not only links the 11 men listed, but it links the Rtvik process itself back to that question that was asked on May 28th. But more than this, it also provides solid proof that the Rtvik system given in the July 9th letter is the system that Srila Prabhupada wanted us to implement after he departs. Well, how's that? Because that was a vital aspect of the question that he was asked on May 28th. The JBC wasn't just asking how those initiations would be conducted, period. No, they were asking how those initiations are to be conducted after you are no longer present with us. That was the most vital part of their question. They wanted to know how these initiations would be conducted after Prabhupada departs. That's what they wanted to know. And on May 28th, Srila Prabhupada could not give them an answer to that question because he himself had not yet settled up how he wanted those Rtvik initiations to be conducted after he has departed. He hadn't settled that yet. After this is settled up, then he will give names of those that he will select to act as Ritviks. You see, he was talking about the Rtvik system prior to the May 28th meeting. So when they asked him how are these initiations to be conducted, they weren't asking who's going to be Guru Srila Prabhupada. You know, if they didn't know Srila Prabhupada had already been discussing Rtvik, they would have been asking who is going to be the next Guru Srila Prabhupada? Who are you going to select as your successor? So they wanted to know that, and they before the May 28th meeting, back on May 23rd, they asked Tamal, go in and can you ask Srila Prabhupada what he's going to do about the successor Guru? And that's when Prabhupada told Tamal that he will set up a Rtvik system. So then they wrote down questions they wanted to ask Prabhupada to get final answers on. They weren't asking about who, they were asking, well, how are these Rtvik initiations to be conducted when you're no longer with us? That's what they wanted to know. And Prabhupada hadn't settled that yet. He had settled he's going to create a Rtvik system, and he has settled that he will select some men to act as Ritviks, but the details of how those Rtvik initiations would be conducted when he's no longer present, he hadn't settled it yet. So after he settles it, then he'll select the men who will act as Rtvik. It makes total logic sense. No twisting, no bending, just understanding the conversation as it took place and what it was about. So therefore, the statement in this letter that links this letter to the May 28th meeting not only links it to his partial response that he will soon select some men to act as Rtvik, but importantly, it links the July 9th description as to how the Rtvik initiations are to be conducted to that question. And that question was concerning how this was to be done in the future when Srila Prabhupada was no longer present with us. Therefore, the link, this opening statement given in this letter, in this July 9th document or letter, that opening statement signifies the purpose of this document. And when we take that statement of purpose, what I've been calling the link, the statement of purpose given in this July 9th letter, and we take that along with the 5 keywords that Srila Prabhupada spoke as the other part of his response to their question on May 28th. Together, those 5 keywords and this statement in the July 9th letter, these provide solid evidence that the Rtvik system authorized in this July 9th letter was Srila Prabhupada's final, settled up response to the GBC's question as to how the initiations are to be conducted after he is no longer present with us. And again, I'm not twisting or bending what Srila Prabhupada said. This is directly based on what His Divine Grace actually said. The link in this letter, along with the 5 key words after this is settled up, provides hard proof that the Rtvik system, first of all, the 5 key words tells us that Prabhupada hadn't settled it on May 28th. So no matter how you argue, no matter what words and what arguments you try to construe and pull out of the rest of the conversation on May 28th, you cannot come to a final conclusion on this system because Srila Prabhupada told him it's not settled yet. After it's settled, then he will select some men to act as Rtvik. So those 5 key words tell us that May 28th, Prabhupada had not settled it. He told us that after it's settled, he will select the Ritviks. 5.5 weeks later, he selects the Ritviks, and in that same letter, the opening statement links it to when he said he would soon select Ritviks. And he gave that statement that he would soon select Ritviks to their question of how initiation would be conducted when you're no longer present, because that question was asking about, it just wasn't asking how are initiations to be conducted. It was asking about how are these initiations to be conducted in the future, particularly when you're no longer present with the Srila Prabhupada, when you're no longer here, after you've departed. That's what we want to know. So this is why that this link here in this letter provides solid proof that the Rtvik system given in this July 9th letter is the system that Srila Prabhupada wanted us to implement after he has departed.